Hi everyone, welcome to this Stop and Chat episode with Shalini Lal. Shalini, as the leader of Uncube, a think tank and consulting firm focusing on the future of work, she helps leaders and teams build and scale with the future in mind. But this is a very short summary of all her experience from UCLA, Wharton, as a writer, board member. You've done a bit of everything around the future of work, and it's great being here today talking to you. You also author the widely popular newsletter "I in the Future," which has over 100,000 subscribers, which is immense. And you also host very frequent LinkedIn lives around this subject. Welcome today, and thank you very much for being here with us, Shalini.
Thank you, Pedro. So happy to be here and to be in conversation with you. Really looking forward to it.
That's great. Shalini, getting into the subjects of the day around to the future of work. This is something you focus a lot, and you help not only companies but also leaders through transformation, innovation, and everything around what it looks like. As someone who has put so much thought into this, if you had to describe the future of work in a few sentences, how would you put it?
It's all about being extremely agile. We are entering a world which is changing every day. So we have to reinvent ourselves and our organizations, and the two go hand in hand. So fast paced, dynamic, agile, creative, being hungry for learning every day.
Being hungry for learning is something I read a lot around what you've written, and it's amazing that someone with so much experience continues pushing for that learning and learning challenges and innovation around that learning and pushing us all to learn more,
I will
which is
tell
great.
you this that this is true. I spend some time every single day, whether it is learning for me personally, or whether it's for my business, or whether it's for a client. But I do keep some time aside every day. And sometimes I don't like doing this, but even on weekends, just to keep pace with all that's happening. And I'm seeing that from all the amazing leaders whom we work with, that so many of them on top of their day jobs, which is long enough, absolutely understand that they have to keep some time aside just for learning now.
And how, touching on that, it's a bit off topic, but touching on that, I think it's quite relevant for our audience. Do you How do you do it with purpose? Because it's very easy, as you say, for us to get on our daily lives with families, with jobs, taking care of ourselves through health, etc. Um, how do you do it? Do you put a time set aside per day? Do it's like at the end of or the beginning of the day? How do you structure it? How do you strategize around keep learning and continuing learning?
Yeah, I'll tell you my process. So there are two routes it takes. One is, just being exposed to a wide range of ideas, because there are things that I don't even know I don't know. So how do you discover what you don't know but should know? So there's that entire piece of reading newsletters or newspapers or any credible sources of information to discover what else is out there that I'm not even aware of at this point in time. So there's that open search. It's open ended. I don't know what I'm going to discover. And that I do in the morning, actually. First thing, just read a little bit for half an hour and see what's happening in the world around me. Helps me situate myself in my own work. But then in the end of the day, actually around 7 p.m. for me, actually I keep half an hour which is just for learning. And for that, for every month I decide, two or three topics that I feel I absolutely must know more about, because it's connected with either some work that we're doing, or it's for my own personal growth, a new skill that I feel I must learn. So I keep half an hour, minimum 20, and 20 to 30 minutes in the evening just for more structured, goal oriented learning. So a bit of both.
Yeah, that strategy of focusing on specific subject for certain periods of time, it's something that can be useful for a lot of us. Um, Going a bit into the topics of our conversation today, when describing the way companies and team leaders address the challenges of the future, I believe you put these in three categories. Can you give a brief overview of each one and the way they approach change?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that we do as Uncube is we work with organizations to help them prepare their own leadership teams for future. So there's a whole set of future ready competencies that we work with, and we help leadership teams first understand how the requirements from them have changed. So, what was considered a really great job yesterday is different from what will be needed tomorrow. So, there's that piece of it. So in the course of our work, we found that there are roughly about three buckets. So there are those who in any of the leadership teams where we called into, there are at least a couple of people who are super plugged into what's happening across the world. So they understand the fact that whether it's technology, whether it is demographics, whether it's geopolitics, industry fragmentation, whatever. So they understand the mega trends, and usually they're the ones who invite us in because they're a little concerned that there aren't enough people within their own leadership team who understand how the world of work is changing, so fundamentally. So they're the vanguards. They are on top of things. I am always in awe of the amount of work that they do. And just like you asked me how I do my learning, I've often asked them that, how are you managing to keep abreast of all that's changing? It's my full-time job, and I still don't think I'm really able to. So that's what they tell me. They say there's no choice today. There's no choice whether we do it when we're on our drive back, whether we do it by listening to a podcast on our way, or by reading whatever, the Wired magazine, New York Times, Economist, whatever it is, whatever's their preferred source of. They have to build it into the routine of the day to just make sense of what's happening. And so there's that group. It's super plugged in. They're the ones most concerned about their organizations typically, so they sometimes invite us in. Then we have very often at least one, sometimes two people who feel that this is too much hype. There's always been change. What's the big fuss? They've sometimes been in careers for 20, 30 years, so they've seen a lot of change, and they have a sense of this is going to come and go. We've always been changing, and we'll always continue to change on our own without such a specific change focused intervention. So they come from there, that I'm not sure all of this is really needed, we've done this in the past, etc., etc. uh, Sometimes they also deny that there's that much changing in their industry. So this is particularly true if we meet people who are not from an industry which is, say, technology or very global, because any organization which is globally connected or tech focused understands change much more, I feel, faster. But if you're, say, manufacturing, or you know say you have a retail store, or a cafe or something, and it's local, you aren't really seeing change around you as quickly. So very often they question you, is there really that much that's changing? Do we really have to? Because obviously, if we say the world is changing, we're also saying you will have to change. And I mean, not everybody wants to change, and absolutely understandably, honestly, I have a lot of understanding and empathy for that. Change is not easy, and it's a lot of effort. So that's the deniers, the people who would rather wish away the change. And I feel for them, I really do. But then we have this large number, and I think this is really the majority of people who, they know something is changing. They just don't know what to do about it. They know change is real, and they are concerned for their careers. So they still have, say, whatever, 10 years ahead of them, and they want to make sure that they have a job, they want to make sure they're doing well in their job, they want to make sure they're doing well in their business, and they need help. So they're the people who are actually most exciting to work with because they're hungry. They're hungry. They love it if someone is able to explain what's changing in the outside world and what that means for them in very clear terms that they can wrap their heads around. And they also really like it if we can tell them, okay, if you want to develop your skills at future scanning, here are two or three tools or two or three ways in which you can go about it. Or if you want to build innovation practices in your team, here are two or three. So they love that, the move from, okay, there's change, but what am I supposed to do? To here are some very specific tools, and you can take these and run. So that's a super exciting group to work with.
I'm glad you see that as a big majority of people because having that excitement of people that still want to embrace change, maybe they just don't know how to go about it, but
Yeah.
they really want it. It's quite
Yeah.
appealing to see that in organizations. You touch on the point of global teams, distributed teams. Um, I was recently in India, first in Bangalore, and then a couple of weeks later in New Delhi, and met a lot of HR leaders, and it was very, very exciting to see how companies are approaching both domestic expansion to Middle East, US, Europe, but also other Southeast Asia countries. Um, how do you see the future of work playing out specifically in India, where companies are employing more contractors, freelancers, distributed teams, and what does the role of the country look like and play like in this global talent pool and the global tech hub as India is becoming?
Yeah, that's a complicated question, and I'll take it in a couple of different parts. So you're absolutely right. And by the way, on another time I'll ask you what your experience of visiting India was like. Super curious about that. No, I mean, India is a very young country. So, I think it always helps to remember that for the world's largest populated country, more than 50% of our population is under 25. So that's a huge, huge demographic fact that changes everything because it means that um, while those who are in their 20s may not necessarily be in positions of responsibility right this second, but they are the majority. And you absolutely cannot, in any organization, um, or rather you would be foolish to uh, not be sensitive to their needs because and if you visited organizations in India, you would have seen when you visit an organization, an average whatever corporate, you will find that more than half of the people you will see are in their 20s. You see it all around. So their expectations from the workplace ought to actually impact the way we work even more. If I'm honest, I think senior leaders who are of a different generation, very often in their 40s, 50s, are uh, perhaps far more reluctant. And, let me share this really interesting finding that we had come up, which we discovered in a project that we had done on what people want from the workplace. Do they want to come to work? Do they want to do hybrid? Do they want to work remotely in office, etc.? And obviously, perhaps not surprisingly, we know that the youngest people in the workforce want some mix of both. They want the mentoring, they want some social connection, but they also want flexibility. And, that's a fairly well documented fact. But what's not often as documented or spoken about is that when you speak to senior leaders, personally, they want the same thing. In the organizational role, they don't want that. So it's like this dichotomy. They will admit to you that personally they would love flexibility. They would love to work from home a lot more. But they feel uncomfortable doing that in the workplace because they're not sure they'll be able to meet whatever organizations expect from them. So it comes from, frankly, the fact that our management practices, our leadership styles, for anyone who's worked in the workplace for a while, are molded in an era where everything did happen face to face. And despite COVID, to my surprise, to be honest, not enough people felt um, comfortable with remote management practices. So I think the future of work in India is going to be more flexible than we realize, and the demographics speak to that. The fact is also that, as you probably noticed, uh, India has some of the largest, consumer digital apps. So you would have noticed there's very little cash transaction anywhere. Almost, yeah, money is almost, cash is
Yeah,
vanished
it was
almost.
always like Google Play or some
Yeah,
similar solutions
correct,
like that
correct.
everywhere.
There's no card and there's no cash. It's all UPI, and that's, I mean, that's really to the credit of the governments that have been part of this. But UPI is everywhere now, everywhere. And I know that I'm astonished, let me be honest. Someone who was part of the scheme had met me 8 years ago and told me that this is what's going to happen. And I could not believe that he was serious, but this is what's happened. So we have a population which is extremely digitally, you know friendly, savvy, proficient. Even if they don't have any other technology in their house, they have a smartphone.
Yeah.
So that's so much a part of the way life happens. So I think we're going to see a lot more of the distributed workforce, a lot more flexible workforce in India in particular, after just a few years, when the current leaders, give way to perhaps a newer generation of leaders. That's my best guess.
Yeah, let's hope these new generations start surfacing up to those management roles and the impact will happen.
Yeah.
I believe I have the same expectations and ambitions as well. Um, touching now, switching a bit gears and going to the end of our conversation. Um, you wrote a very interesting article on this on the still climbing, the ways women still have it super hard at work. Um, you outline ways in which the workplace is still behind in regards to women. Um, what are some of the key hurdles we still need to get past? And will this flexibility that we were just talking about of the workplace, this remote setting, play positively towards removing some of those hurdles?
Really good question. And I'll answer the second part first. Will it help? Because the evidence in that is mixed. Uh, on the one hand, organizations, Professor Nicholas Cage at Stanford has done, Nicholas Bloom at Stanford has done a lot of research on the impact of, different work arrangements on attrition, career growth, etc. And one of the most interesting findings for me, which has been replicated several times, is the moment you offer flexibility, women's attrition rate halves. Halves. Just wrap your head around that. So obviously, it it's giving women almost a lifeline to be able to manage everything else in their life along with work. And half is I mean, you just can't ignore it. It's huge.
No,
So it
it's huge.
it really is. It's something that they find extremely helpful in their lives. Now, the big but is this, that if it is only women who are using that flexibility, if that's, even if it's an organization wide policy, but it's largely the women who work flexibly and the men work from office, then it's the men who get more mentoring and get more promotion opportunities and have faster career growth. So that's where it's mixed, because yes, it's something that women want. And yet, unless it's an organizationally wide used policy, not just on paper, but if
Mm-hmm.
we don't see enough, if it's just women who are using it, then they don't, progress as much in their career. So that's a challenge. But I'll come to the first question: what are the hurdles? So, one of the most interesting things is that I thought it was just India, to be honest, for a long time. I thought that, okay, this is an India problem. And of course, there's the India flavor to it. But when I was doing my PhD, one of the things I was stunned by, and I went to UCLA, so we were dealing with global data, was that pretty much everywhere in the world, and there are today over 300 studies that show that the moment you remind a young girl, and by a young girl I mean someone who is usually older than 5 but less than 13, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the moment you remind a young girl that they're a girl, they do worse on any test that they think boys do better at: math, science, all of it. So it's just the first time this was discovered was in a study which was done near Boston, where uh, a few Asian American girls in kindergarten from K through grade 3 were given a drawing, and the drawing was, either two kids eating noodles because that was supposed to prime them that they're Asian and therefore good at maths, or a girl playing with a doll, which reminded them that they're a girl and therefore they're going to do the test. And the group that got the drawing of the kid with playing with a doll performed more poorly on the maths test than any of the other groups. Now, that was the first time this was discovered. It's been done over 300 times, including a study which I peripherally participated in, close by to Delhi as well. And the fact is, all over the world, when young girls are reminded they're a girl, why do they do poorly? And the way researchers are describing it is that the social structure of this world, like men, positions of power, women take care of family, that fundamental social structure is embedded by age 5 or 6, before the girls or boys have the language to describe it. They don't even know that this is what they feel. They don't know it. They would not be able to tell you. They would not know why they did poorer on a maths test because they colored a photograph of a kid with a doll. They would not know what's happening. But because this is one of the most widely replicated studies, it's tapping into something very fundamental, and which is at the starting point. Girls who become women later start off with this disadvantage because somewhere, they may not even be conscious of it, in their own mind, it's men who are the leaders of the workplace. That's the social structure. It's been coded since they were babies almost. They're not aware of it. So that means that they're going to ask themselves much more questions. Can I do this? Can I not do this? And again, we have research, lots of research which shows that women ask themselves many more questions and hold themselves to a much, much higher standard. So it you know, starts right there. Now, in the workplace, for the same level of performance, women receive much more negative feedback than men. This is again a reality. So imagine the cycle, right? So you have, on the one hand, without being conscious of it necessarily, you aren't sure of your place in this organizational world. And you might also be working for an organization, which is most organizations, where the more senior you go, there are fewer and fewer women. It's the
Mm-hmm.
truth of 90% or maybe more of organizations. So now, when you put all of this together, you have a situation where it's not very comfortable for women in some ways, because how do you begin to feel confident and find your stride when the world, when the feedback, the managerial feedback you get, something like 76% of high performing women get negative feedback, 2% of high performing men get negative feedback. So, just look at so there's self doubt, and then there is the negative feedback. And at the same time, you don't even see any women in your organization who are really at the top. It's so hard to go on then. So it's, not really so surprising that for women, then the experience is so disheartening.
True. And I'll have to ask the follow up question, which is how do you see change happening around this, and how can the future companies improve and address this and enable much more fair workplace and working environment?
Honestly, I think the most effective way, because a lot of this is so deeply coded, you can't change everything all at once. But if you're an organization, the best thing you can do is bring in a whole lot of senior women. And not any senior woman, I would say, because not all senior women also understand the importance of their role in helping other women progress, you know. So for senior women leaders, who understand their importance both as role models but also as cultural enablers for other women in the organization, so that they get the opportunities that they need, they get the mentoring that they need, and they get the positive feedback that they need to have the confidence and the ability to carry on. So I think that's, if you had to say one thing, then that would be it.
Okay, we have to do it. Let's do it. Shalini, it was great meeting you. Thank you very much for sharing here a bit of your experience around the future of work, organizations in India, and women in the workplace. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Really appreciate it. Wonderful being on your podcast.